we've created this mindset of you're only winning and succeeding if you're in a high stress state. And it's the same with exercise, that, no pain, no gain. And, like, we've created this false mindset that exercise has to be brutal and it has to destroy the body. And if you're not sore the next day, you didn't do it right.
Welcome to the Calorie Conundrum Podcast with Coach Strick. Join us as we expand the weight loss conversation to beyond just calories and dare to ask the question, why does eating less and exercising more sometimes not produce the desired results? Here's Coach Strick to discuss this Calorie Conundrum.
Welcome to the Calorie Conundrum Podcast. This is Coach Strick, and on today's episode, we have Carl Weston. Carl has been working his way around the world training and coaching many different people and professionals. In London, Carl worked with professional athletes at a sports rehab clinic and also trained at a private health spa. Then he moved to Bermuda to run and coach at a corporate facility. Now Carl operates his own facility in Ontario, Canada called Raven Wellness, working with other Czech professionals to spread the knowledge and teachings of the Czech Institute. Carl found the Czech Institute at a time in his life when he was questioning many things, but found through following the Czech system and methods that he was on the right path. He has a huge passion and respect for the Institute. Carl's life has become a reflection of the Czech system and tools, and he implements them even when he's not training or working. He has a great passion for many sports and has competed in surfing and rugby at high national levels. Let's hear what Carl has to say about assessing your stress load and doing what you need, not what you want. Carl, welcome to the podcast.
Sean, thanks for having me, mate. Good to be on.
Yeah, so I always find it interesting to hear people's backstories. So tell us a little bit about your backstory in health.
Oh, it's a long one. It's a lot of years now. It's over 20 years, 20 plus years now in the health and wellness field. Like a lot of people that fall into the Czech paradigm of the training, I used to started off as a trainer, went through university, got degrees in sports science, carried on my education from there with the typical kind of personal training route, looking at the group fitness side of things, spinning, different weight training certifications. Then got into the rehab side, the manual therapy, the sports massage therapy side of things. And that kind of led me onto the path with where I'm at now with the Czech system. I'd get a lot of clients to a really good place, but never got them to 100%. But only ever dealing with clients on a physical level. And I was working in a clinic in just outside of London in like a wellness clinic. And I was working for this rehab company that worked with professional athletes. And my boss at the time gave me one of Paul's VHSs. That tells you how long ago that was. It was like this VHS in a paper sleeve. And I watched that video, and that's kind of what propelled me into the Czech world. And it was going into the Czech world, which really opened my eyes and just put me on a platform of wanting to learn more about the body on a mental, physical, and spiritual point, as opposed to just like a one-horse pony or like a one paradigm element to the body. And over the last 20 years, I've traveled the world with my trade. I've been around the world multiple times. I traveled a lot when I was younger because I had a huge passion for surfing, and that took me around the world quite a bit. And then I ended up in Bermuda for a couple of years working in a gym and wellness clinic practice down there. And then I moved to Canada, and I've been here ever since. And I'm 8 years in, and I've got my own practice, which has changed a bit in current climates. I'm now 100% online, and it's been a great shift to really the coaching platform that I have. And it's, I can't attribute it to one thing, but my Czech background's been huge with that. And now I fully work with coaching people online and doing all that sort of stuff.
So can you tell the listeners a little bit more about, you've talked about the Czech training. Can you tell us about the Czech Institute?
So the Czech Institute it breaks down to corrective holistic exercise kinesiology. It's a 4 to 7 year program, depending on how relaxed and how fast you really want to get through it. And there's two elements to it. There's the biomechanical side, which is now called the IMS1, the Integrative Movement Specialist. And that looks at the biomechanics of the body, and that's the orthopedic assessment side. So that's broken down through 5 levels where you learn basic postural assessments in the first year, looking at the lumbar spine, thoracic spine, the pelvic tilt, forward head, basic plumb line. And each year you put more and more into it. You then start to look at the length tension assessments. Then we really specifically go into the lumbar spine, disc pathologies, and lower extremity assessments. And then when you're at CP3, you start learning to assess the eyes, the ears, the jaw, the ribs, the rest of the spine. And then the top of it is kind of mastering it all together. So that's the biomechanical side. And then there's the holistic life coaching side. And that's everything else. That's how are people eating? How are people communicating? How are people breathing? How are people sleeping? How are people thinking? It kind of encompasses the rest of the mental, spiritual, and emotional elements of the coaching platform. And then it's just figuring out how you blend the two together and what works best in your practice.
So you mentioned one big part of that, one big component is the biomechanical part. And you said that now you're having to work online. So how's that aspect? How are you addressing that aspect of it, the biomechanical online?
Well, whereabouts do you live again? You're down in the States, right?
Yeah, I'm down in Texas right now.
So you're in the good place. you're like, we've just gone into another full-on lockdown. The only stores that are open again in Ontario are grocery stores and pharmacies. So the hands-on for me has come to a halt. I have to respect whatever's in play right now, whether I believe in it or not. But my actual in-person assessments has been grinded to a halt through these lockdowns. I managed to see some people through last summer when restrictions were lifted a little bit, and I probably managed to get about 10 to 15 assessments done over the course of the summer. But since we've been in lockdown again, it's everything's closed down for me. So I've just really transitioned to the other side of the coaching platform.
Just focusing on holistic lifestyle coaching. Could you talk about what the components of that are?
So there's three elements to that, and then the 4 quadrants. So the main elements are it's the foundational principles. And Paul's 4 doctors, they're what it's really incorporated around. And you've got your sleep, nutrition, hydration, your exercise, your mindset, and I'm having a brain fart.
Breathing.
Breathing. So there's those 6 foundational principles, which are the key to what that principles is. Now, the more you go through, you get into a lot more of the energetic side of things. You start to look into Paul's zone systems and the chakra systems, and then you get into the energy lines, the meridians, you get into the organs, you get into dowsing, you get into other healing modalities that are out there, and it just opens your eyes to really everything that you can be doing as a health coach and a wellness advisor.
Yeah. So you said before the call that it was good timing for this interview because you're working with some people that are looking to lose weight. So how is someone that's looking to lose weight that comes to you, how are they experiencing their plan different than, the average person that goes to in search for weight loss?
Yeah, I've had a lot of people that have come to me recently that are doing all the things that mainstream media tells them to do. They're all eating restricted diets, and I'll call it a diet. So it's restricted calorie eating and working out probably what I would consider too much with everything else that they've got going on. And a lot of people that are listening might resonate with this, and it works short term. People often see results in the first 6 weeks when you do restricted calorie eating and you increase the intensity and durations of your workouts. But you start to put yourself into a deficit post that 6 week cycle. And a lot of people start seeing weight coming on, and they get frustrated with the eating habits. So how it's different with me is just the whole approach is very different. You know, it's understanding more what foods they're eating, what their metabolic type or primal type is. And it's more about getting them on foods that work for them and changing their relationship with food. I mean, we can sit here and talk about nutrition, what we know. I don't believe there's any real food that's bad, but you've got to figure out what foods work for you and what foods work for you alone. I'm sure your diet's probably very different to my diet, and our needs are probably very different within our requirements. They might be a little bit similar, I'm not too sure, but it's teaching people to know that they're very unique within what their needs and wants are. And that's how my approach to nutrition goes with my clients. It's figuring out either whether you want to call it the metabolic type or what best, for clients that don't know that, is it's what best macronutrient ratio suits a client. So if you look at the metabolic type in a pulse primal pattern, there's 3 styles that you fall into, and this covers every single diet out there. You've got the polar type, which right now people that would be a polar type would be the ones that see success with either like a carnivore or a ketogenic diet. You then have the mixed type, which would probably be like your paleo Mediterranean type style diets, and then you have your equatorial diets, and they're more the carbohydrate style type diets. So easiest to like the vegetarians, and the vegan world kind of fits into that a little bit more because it's just harder to get that mass dose of proteins in the sense of the animal proteins. And it's figuring that out and then figuring out what foods work. You know, it's not all foods work for people. And for me, it's the journey of teaching them that it doesn't matter if the food's considered a good food or not. It's, well, what's your body's response to it and does it work for you? And that's where I see my success. It's less about the actual diet, and it's a lot more about getting them eating foods that work for them and that don't create inflammatory responses and don't create a negative response on the visceral system and the physical body itself.
So obviously the diet's an important aspect. And with the lockdown, are these people working out, or you creating home workouts for these people, or what's their physical activity look like?
Well, depends. A lot of my clients right now, I'm having them do less, because a lot of them, like an old school thought process with it, and you'll know this being in our industry, it was that you should eat less and train more, and it's completely opposite most of the time. We all have a survival rate of calories that we need for our body to survive. And that means doing nothing, like lowest level survival calorie intake. And a lot of people on these deficit diets don't even reach that. So they push their body into like that feast famine mentality. It's like a high stress state. So exercise is really important. You know, having people move for the mindset's key. But it changes client to client basis. You know, being and seeing the Czech world, it's really hard for me to prescribe exercise without seeing biomechanically what's going on with someone's body. But I'm a proponent that any movement's good movement as long as it's working you towards your goal. And in current climates now, I just have to be paid close attention to energy levels, sleep, and looking at sleep-wake cycles, looking at where they're at nutritionally and what their needs and requirements are for that, and then looking at what their expenditure is through whatever workouts they're doing. I'm working with a professional ballerina at the moment at the Boston School of Ballet, and she still works out like 6 hours a day. So having someone like that's very different from your stay-at-home mum who's just trying to figure it out and get in shape and work those routines. So we're all unique. It's a day-by-day program. I do have a program that I get a lot of people on, which is like an elimination type diet to remove all the known inflammatory foods. And the success in that's phenomenal, but it's short term. It's just to clean them out, to really help them find what their best path is.
Yeah. So you mentioned taking workout away or reducing the amount people are working out. So can you talk about that and the thought process behind that?
Yeah, that probably sounds a little bit backwards to a lot of people, but you've got to look at overall stress response. And it's something, it's kind of one of those taboo subjects. And I'm sure you see this with your clients. And we've created a society that has a mentality of that if we're not exhausted, we're not winning. If we're not first in, last out, we're not successful. And we've created this mindset of you're only winning and succeeding if you're in a high stress state. And it's the same with exercise, that, no pain, no gain. And, like we've created this false mindset that exercise has to be brutal and it has to destroy the body. And if you're not sore the next day, you didn't do it right. And if you're not crawling out the gym, you're doing it wrong. And it's such a bad mindset. We're in a world now where we're just bombarded with stress we never really switch off from work because we all have cell phones now where, I'm sat there with my partner and we're watching a show at night and my phone's pinging emails from clients and things like that. They know I'm not going to respond at that time, but we're constantly on as a society. So it's balancing people out. And it's creating that fine balance with what they can do and as regards to what they want to do and what they really need to do. And it's having those conversations with clients. I've got clients that are up at 5 a.m. They're out the door at 6. They work till 7 or 8 p.m. at night, but they still want that brutal workout. And it's having those conversations with those clients that, listen, this workout may not serve you in the best way right now. I get it. That's what you want to do, but you're already exhausted at this point. We need to replenish the body as opposed to taking away from it. And it's just working with an individual client on their needs and wants and what they really should be doing as opposed to what they think they should be doing.
So what are some indications that someone may be excessively stressed? Because I think this is what you're talking about. What you just said is basically like the philosophy I have around this whole weight loss thing and health in general. It's just that people don't recognize that exercise is a stress. And then we have all the other stresses that you're mentioning, but how do you tell when someone has too much stress? Or
I mean, you're right. And like everything is a stress. Every time we eat, it creates a stress response on the body. Every time we pick up a weight, it's a stress response on the body. Every time you walk into the office, you're around electricity, it creates a stress response on the body. Now, the ways that I measure that, we have, and you've seen these forms, we have intake forms that we can use through the Check Institute, which really help us dial in if someone's overusing or utilizing a certain pathway, or if they're in the green, which would be considered good. But you also look for, I also look for tips that can't lose weight, waking up constantly fatigued, never have the energy, struggle with their weight, either like not being able to gain it, not being able to lose it, not being able to gain muscle mass, irritability, the need of stimulants like caffeines or tobaccos to get them through the day. The inability to focus. I since the pandemic, I've seen and heard an astronomical increase in people's inability to focus. and people's inability to kind of stay focused on one topic for like long periods of time. And these are all signs to me of just overly stressed responses. You know, the weight gain's one that in our field, and being in the fitness and either the FDN or the pools world, we get a lot of people come that weight loss is a primary target for them. And it's another big sign to me that they're highly stressed and they're having cravings that are not serving them. They're not giving themselves what they need. And, you know, these are all stress responses, and sleep's one of the easiest things to deal with that, but it's one of the biggest abuses that people put on themselves, and not really tracking their sleep and not getting good enough sleep.
Yeah. So, I mean, those are some key points that, you know, I'm trying to, with this podcast, that's what I'm trying to do, is educate people about these issues, and the fact that all these things that you're mentioning are common. They happen all the time. You know, people don't get enough sleep. People don't get enough recovery. They don't, you know, they're not eating the right foods. They're not drinking enough water, so on and so forth. But just because everyone's doing it, they think it's okay and it's the way to do things. And they don't realize that those things that are stressing them all accumulate, and it's the reason why they can't lose weight. And they have to address the stressors, because just exercising more and eating less is not going to, you know, it's not going to get the results that they want. And another thing you mentioned that I think is really important is the assessments that you have people do. It just blows my mind that, especially in the fitness industry, you know, they'll bring a client in as a personal trainer, and there will be no assessment, like no assessment physically, no assessment like on paper, like what you're talking about. And so it's like you're just working with this person where you have no idea anything about them. And all that, you know, information is really important to the design of the program. Like you were saying before, you look at all this information to, you know, address their stress level, and then create a program designed, you know, how stressful they are. And without any assessment, it's impossible to do. And so I think that's a very important point as well.
It's, I mean, yeah, you know, Paul's known for his, if you're not assessing, you're guessing line. And it's true with everything. And, you know, we really got to a point where we neglect our body in such a way that we pay more attention to other things. Like, if you have a problem with your car, you take it to a garage. They don't just say like, oh, we're just going to do this. We'll just rotate the tires and we'll clean the filter and you'll be good to go. They do an assessment on it, you know.
Diagnostic, yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot more advanced today than what it used to be. But, you know, today they'll plug it into a computer and they'll run a full diagnostic panel to figure out what's going on. And we've been trained, for whatever reasons, to not want to put that attention and pay that close-mindedness to the body. We just want to find quick fixes, you know. What can I drink that'll do this? What pill can I take that'll do that? And there's no quick fix with this. I mean, you know as much as I do, we're in this industry, and we work with people genuinely do crave health and wellness. But most people go at it the wrong way without knowing where they start. We all start at a baseline of wherever we're at today. And it's figuring that out, you know. It's like, what's your biggest stressor? You know, it might be financial stress. Then coming in and working out with you doesn't get rid of that financial stress. It just adds a bigger physical stress. But we've got to have
financial stress.
Yeah, because you got to get paid for it. And then I'm like, well, listen, maybe you should go and have a conversation with an accountant or a financial advisor, you know. And then the relationship stress, and the pandemic's really brought an awareness to the domestic abuse in Canada's, I think it's gone up like 60% or something like that. It's astronomical. But so there's that relationship stress, and it's like, well, you don't just ignore that when you walk into the gym for a workout. We just adding to even more stress. And it's like, I think I've heard Paul say this and plenty of other people, you don't leave all that at the door when you walk in a gym. Yeah. It's kept in this physical self, and then we just add more onto it. And we never really give ourselves that time to really heal. And, that's what it's about. It's not there's not one pill for this. It used to be probably, you go back 20, 30 years, like you just got to run, you got to go lift some weights and you'll lose weight. And we now know that it's not just that. There's so many other lifestyle factors that you have to bring into it and pay attention to with that.
Yeah, so we talked about the diet, and we talked about, reducing the stress as much as you can. But what are some recommendations to reduce stress for the people that are kind of limited on options? Like they have a job, it's stressful, but, they're trained to have this job and it's paying the bills, and they got a family and it's stressful and they can't get rid of the family. And, what are some recommendations for these people to kind of lower their stress levels?
So, there's always I have like go-tos that are like low cost and easy to kind of enforce for people. And I'm not going to sit here and say you've got to eat grass-fed, grass-finished meat or eat only organic food. But the first thing would be to avoid processed food as much as you can. Try and eat real food. And when I say real food, I mean, it should be as close to the form as what it is when it's pulled out the ground, pulled off a tree, or, butchered and killed in that sense. If you can't grow it, pick it, kill it, like you shouldn't really be eating it. So that's my first one, is like try and avoid any highly processed food as much as you can. Sleep's a big one. Like we all have access to sleep. We all need sleep for many reasons, for many recovery and many beneficial reasons, but getting people to really dial in their sleep, having them pick a bedtime and a wake time that they can commit to throughout the week. That for me, that's one of the biggest ones. That's my non-negotiable with clients. I'm like, you need to tell me what time you're going to bed and when you wake up. And there is no, what I watched a TV show, you got to stay by that because it's your biggest recovery tool. I find not enough people drink enough water. It's one of those things that I'm like, we really do need to drink water. We have 2 billion biochemical reactions a second, that 94% of them all require water. And yes, we get water in food and other drinks, but things like caffeines and teas act as a diuretic, which actually take more water out than you put into the system. Getting out in fresh air, just having that time to just get outside, get in nature, get some fresh air and see the sunlight, expose your body to some sun. For a lot of people, I'd probably say it's more beneficial for them to go for a walk outside than it is to go for a workout in a gym. Other things, start working on yourself, listen to podcasts, get a book, like just start paying attention and start listening to your body, and it's hold healthy communications, look at what triggers you. That, we could really go down the rabbit hole with a lot of these things, but it's just work the basics for yourself. Figure out, learn what you need to eat to make you feel good. Learn how much sleep you need to make you feel good. Then you can start putting in about learning how much exercise you need so that it doesn't take from you, that it actually builds you up and gives you life affirmative energy that gives you more to put back into the rest of the world. And, keep it simple. Like, people are always trying to overcomplicate all these things. I'm like, nah, keep everything simple.
Yeah, that's perfect, man. Like, those are some great tips. And I would say one thing you said in there that I think, it's all important, but one thing that stood out to me was the kind of finding out what you need. And I feel like in today's society, we have a real big problem of, you can call it passing the responsibility, or whatever, we're looking for someone to tell us, what does this expert guru say, or what does the doctor say that's good for me, instead of asking ourselves what's good for me, And I think that's an important step, is to, figure out what you need, because that's all that really matters anyway.
100%.
Yeah. And so those are all some very good tips. And, it's the same message that we're hearing from other guests. It's the basics. You gotta adhere to the basics, and, find out what works for you. But a lot of people, like you said, they're looking for that pill, that quick fix. And like you said, it works in the short term usually. I mean, like you said, about 6 weeks. And then it almost always, it not only goes back to where it was, it usually gets worse in some way.
Yeah. And that's the downside. And, that's the sad side of my industry. I see people that have tried, and genuinely, you got to give them credit. They try. And they've tried all the diets. They've tried, I get clients that, I've tried CrossFit. I've done Beachbody. I've done F45. I've done Orange Theory, and I've done all the diets. And they all say we have little wins, but it never works. And I'm like, well, you've just not found the right one that works, or you've not given it enough time. And, you don't have to look very far, that you've only got to go and speak to a few vegetarians. And for some of them, they'll thrive on it. Some others are like, nope, not for me. Flip that to the carnivore type thing. Some people feel amazing on it. Some people feel terrible. And it still blows my mind that people don't get that there's not a one size fits all in any of this. We're all like, what Sean needs is different to what Carl needs. I know that I'm good on definitely a more ketogenic diet at breakfast and lunch, with a little bit more carbohydrate in the evening. But it's took 20 years of being in the industry, but 40 years of life of getting myself to that point to really know what fuels me up, doesn't give me any kind of energy drags or lags, doesn't give me any cravings for bad foods or like the sweet foods that can kind of really derail you. And it's working with that. But, there's one side of that will say, well, you eat too much fat, your cholesterol's going to be too high. And then there's the other side will say, well, that's nonsense, that doesn't really exist. And it's like, listen, if it works for me now, I'm going to run with that. I'm also at the point that I'm not married to that way of living, that it might change. And it normally does shift for me a little bit in the summer here in Canada. Like, I definitely don't need as much red meat when it warms up outside. But I switch with that, and I check in with my body, and, I've got to a point where I really know what my body needs nutritionally and how much I can put into a workout and things like that. And it changes season by season and year by year.
Yeah. So you're basically saying you just have to pay attention. And the person that you're describing, the person that's legitimately tried and, they're not seeing results. That's like the perfect, like the avatar for the person that I'm trying to get, out to this podcast with. So, yeah, that's cool that you mentioned that, because that's exactly who I'm trying to talk to, because they've tried all these, right things to do. They're working out hard and they're eating less. They're not seeing results. In many cases, like with the workout aspect of it, in that 6 week time frame, you usually get results. And I said before, usually they go back to where they were or worse. And on the fitness aspect, that's an injury. And if you're injured, like, you're not going to be doing any working out or moving, or depending on what the injury is. But usually people almost always end up worse down the road than when they started, because they're just going too hard on the workouts. They're restricting the food too much, which results in not getting enough nutrients that they need to rebuild their body, and, ultimately ends up with some kind of injury or in a position where it's worse than when they started. And so,
and like, just to the people that you said that you're attracting, like, if they're going to be listening to this and they're going to pick up on this, something that, like, I would always really want to stress with them, that doesn't necessarily mean that the ratios of food that they're eating is wrong. We need to understand that not all good foods are good for us. Like Dave Asprey's gone into this quite a lot with kale. Kale, like we would all agree that kale is probably a great food, like when we look at the nutrient value and what it does for the body, but it's really hard on the digestive system and can have a really negative side effect on some people when they eat it, and they can get quite gassy. And that's the same with a lot of the other cruciferous vegetables, like the cabbage and things like that often leave people quite gassy. And it's just because we think salady foods or vegetables are great doesn't mean that they're great for you as an individual. There's a lot of, like, the nightshade family can cause a lot of problems with people. I'm not great with peppers. And, I know if I'm going to eat peppers, then I need to just like up my dose of like digestive enzymes to really get me through that meal. And I can't sit here and say peppers are the worst food ever. They're going to give you gas and they're going to make you bloated. They just don't work for me. But other nightshades I'm okay with. I'm not great with gluten. I'm not celiac, but it bloats me up really quick. And I'm like that with most grain type sources. They just don't serve me. Oats, absolute. I don't have any gas or bloating with oats, but my energy goes from here to here within 20 to 30 minutes of eating. And it's little things like that like I would really want everyone to understand, because these people follow these diets and it doesn't work. And it doesn't mean that the foods are bad. It's back to that. Listen, you got to work out what foods work for you and what your biome is set. We all have this bacterial content in our intestinal system that breaks down foods, and it's set to break down a specific type and ratio of foods. And it's getting that, figuring out what that is, but also understanding that it's liable to change, and having that flexibility and the nutrients, metabolic flexibility, being able to switch from keto to fasting to paleo to carnivore to vegan. And in some degree we're right with that. Like we should be able to switch and move around like nutrient requirements, but it's figuring out what you want and what works for you ultimately. And on this path for your clients, it's teaching them, listen, just because it's a leafy green doesn't mean that you're going to be able to digest it very well.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because that's an important point that can be very frustrating for people. It's because, you say eat healthy, and then they start eating all these healthy, quote unquote, healthy foods, but it still doesn't work, or you're having issues like bloating or headaches or whatever. And it's like, well, your kale can do that. And they're just like, and they get to a point where they just kind of throw their hands up and say, can't eat anything. It's like, but there's definitely, things you can eat. You just, like you said, you just have to find them for yourself. And
one of my clients on Thursday, he was so proud of himself. He's like, oh, I'm eating quinoa every day. What do you think of quinoa? And I'm like, well, it's like, personally, I don't like it. It doesn't work for me. But I'm not a good grainy type person. He's like, well, what do you mean it doesn't work for you? And I'm like, well, believe it or not, more people are intolerant to quinoa than they are gluten. And he was like, what? And I'm like, it's not been in our food trade system long enough, but it's titled as one of the superfoods. Yeah. It's like quinoa, this superfood, so nutrient dense and this and that. And I'm like, well, that's great. But can you digest it, and can you break it down, and can you absorb the nutrients that it can give you? And a lot of people, it doesn't work for that way. So it's just to anyone listening, have patience and just have understanding that not all foods work. And my client this morning, my ballerina that I'm working with, she's really cleaned her diet up and she's really feeling her way with foods right now. And she came today and she said, like, I'm really struggling when I eat nuts. And I'm like, well, what are the nuts that you're eating? And she's like, these are my 3 common ones. But she's like, I definitely noticed some small bloating and a little bit of gas and irritation in like the digestive system. And I'm like, that's really great that she's picked that up. You know, we've been working together for a couple of weeks and she's now aware, you know, and it's 2 weeks ago, she had some organic granola from like Whole Foods, and she's thinking it's organic, it's great, it's gonna like good, but she had the worst reaction to it. And she was just saying she was super like bloated and had digestive issues, but she thought it was good because it was like an organic granola. But she's dialed in, she's learned to listen, so she knows that she can't eat that granola. It doesn't mean she can't eat any other granolas, but that one, there's something in it. And you know, now with the nuts and like my conversation with the nuts, I'm like, well, you know, we can try soaking them to see if we can eliminate the reaction to the nuts. Because food preparation is a big part of all this as well. And when the nuts are soaked, it removes a lot of those proteins that react to the body. And so we're going to try that with it, but people just wouldn't even want to go down that pathway and go through this journey. So it's just, let's hope that people can hear this and get inspired not to give up and figure out what works for them at this point.
Yeah, good points. Well, Carl, thanks for being on with us here today. If the listeners would like to get a hold of you or find out more about you, where should they go?
Everything is Raven Wellness. So it's Raven Wellness on Facebook, it's Raven Wellness on Instagram, and my website is ravenwellness.com.
All right, and if you're looking for an online coach, it looks like that's what you're going to be doing nowadays. So thanks for joining us today, Carl.
No worries. Thanks for having me, my man. It's good to connect with you.
I hope you enjoyed that episode with Carl. Sometimes we must give ourselves a reality check when it comes to what we want versus what we need. We want to lose 20 pounds in 2 weeks, but what we need is to be consistent over time. We want to kill it at our early morning workout, but what we need is more sleep. Sometimes if we step back from the situation we are in, we can see more clearly what we truly need. But sometimes it takes someone from the outside to help guide our health and weight loss decisions. Find an expert you can trust and run an experiment on yourself. Remember, like Carl said, most programs, no matter what you do, will see results in the first 6 weeks. The question is, how is the program working in 3 months, a year from now, or 3 years from now? If you have been trying the same method for years and haven't seen results, or you are worse off than when you started, you may need to find another plan. I hope the information in this podcast can help you find the answers you are looking for. And with that said, this is Coach Strick saying thanks for listening, and remember, when calories in, calories out doesn't work, that, my friend, is a calorie conundrum.
This podcast, including Coach Strick and guests, disclaim responsibility for any possible adverse effects for the use of any information contained herein. Coach Strick and/or guests may recommend products or services in which they have a direct or indirect financial interest. To find out more, please visit www.calorieconundrum.com.